Welcome to Deeply Disturbing Things.
The podcast.
We're two anxious counselors who like to talk about deeply disturbing things.
Yeah, we are. And
And
yeah, we do.
sometimes we press record.
Yes. So, this is my confessional.
I'm ready for it.
Um, about 4 months ago, we did a Zoom podcast
Right?
and I forgot to press record.
Which one was it?
Well, it's the one I'm about to do again
Okay.
because it was really important
Wait a minute. Which one was
for the
it?
timeline.
Oh, was it a sequel?
Yeah, it was a sequel one. So I have to do it again because for the, what do you call it?
Okay.
The continuity.
Oh, probably because I saw the Zoom thing. Okay.
So the
Okay.
reason I waited 4 months is so you would forget what I
I
talked about.
I will 100% probably would have forgotten a week just because of my brain, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I did. I have no idea which one it is. I know which ones you kind of had a sequel to, but I'm good with waiting.
Yeah. So you have heard this before, but I'm hoping that within 4 months it'll be sort of fresh again.
I've had so much going on in my life. There's no brain space for anything, so everything will be new.
All right. So let's give this globe a spin.
Okay, I think I'm already remembering barely.
I rescued this from the garbage.
I thought didn't your son get that or something and he
Yeah.
wanted
And
it?
then he threw it
Oh
away.
my gosh, I remember that. Why do I remember that?
And then he threw it away because it's not a good globe.
Why do I
I
remember
mean,
that
look at the
globe?
price. What does the price say?
Where did you get that? When did I
I have to
ever
put
know
my
about
glasses
it?
on. Where are they? Oh, here they are.
How blind are you right now?
So blind I can't see the price.
This hates the
5.99.
bright orange sticker.
Can you
Okay.
read that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you had eye surgery.
I mean, a while ago.
All right.
Worse though.
So I want to bring your attention to this area
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
at the bottom of the globe.
Antarctica. I remember
Antarctica.
Antarctica. I
Yes.
remember this topic
I did,
loosely.
well, I did two topics.
Right.
One
One issue and then the
that
second issue.
posted and the second one that I
Right.
forgot to record.
Okay.
That we were just talking together
Right.
weirdly on Zoom about this.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And after I was like, where is it?
I've done that before where I'm like, I thought this happened.
Okay. So
I'm
this
here.
is um about the race to the South Pole. So this is our globe here. We have North Pole and South Pole, and there's two different kinds. There's magnetic north and south and geographic north and
Mhm.
south. So we're talking about the geographic
You know what's
South
interesting
Pole.
is I recently watched a thing about like where like storing data, like data mining or not data mining stuff, but like important electronic data in case of world crises where the safest places would be. And they were like really cold climates where things could be, it's away from population centers. And they talked about places like Antarctica.
Well, it's full of mystery, Antarctica. I'm fascinated by it. All right, so this is the race to the South Pole. So it's the race to the first people that would get
Get
there.
to claim it.
Yes, because it was like un unwalked on land, as far as we know. At least this current race of humans. Who knows? There may have been other people that lived or other beings that lived here before us that we don't know about.
Polar beings.
Well, there's some interesting stuff out there. Okay, so the two people that are in the race, here's the players.
Okay.
Britain's Robert Falcon Scott.
I'm remembering some ship names.
There's a lot of ship names.
Okay, great. Okay.
But I think when you name your kid Falcon,
There's high expectations
there's high expectations. So I think
for like
there's
to happen anytime something cool
there was pressure
occurs.
from the beginning that
Mhm.
he needed to do some exploration shit.
Agreed.
So the other person is Norway's Roald Amundsen. So they were racing to be the first person to reach the South Pole. This is part of what's known as the heroic age of Antarctic exploration because a whole bunch of people were trying to get there. and
Hmm.
explore
And it's cold.
and stay there. And, it was like, okay, the first person to like get eyes on it, the first person to stand on it, the first person
Mhm.
to spend the night. There's all these
It's
steps.
exciting and unknown.
Yes. So this all started, the race between Scott and Amundsen started in 1899 by another Norwegian. So Norwegians are key players
Hmm.
in this exploration, not just of Antarctica, but they were key players in exploring like lands up to the north as well. And they're totally set up for it
Hmm.
because they live in snowy mountains
Right.
and are a shipping country too. So
It's
they're like
it's
set
their
up.
fort.
Yeah. So Norwegian Karsten Borchgrevink led a British expedition. So sometimes the Brits, I think, would like get the Norwegian people to help out because they
Mhm.
were so good at stuff. And so that was the first Antarctic exploration, and they were the first to spend the winter on the Antarctic mainland. And they were the first to use dogs and sledges on the continent. So
Hmm.
that's really key
Hmm.
because um, the British look down on that
Hmm.
strategy
Hmm.
because they considered it quote unquote primitive because that's what the
Right.
indigenous people did. They used the sled dogs and all of that.
And they didn't have a
That
hoity-toity way to do it better though. So
they thought they were
yeah.
above it.
Mm.
But that is going to
You
come
know,
into play
do
here.
you know what a horse and carriage is on ice? A sled.
Oh, we're going to be getting into the horses.
Okay, great. Great.
So you did
I
forget.
I
That's
rem
good.
I actually forgot until you said the horses, and then my brain actually remembered, but I did forget up to that point.
I was hoping 4 months would be enough for you to
I
forget.
did forget. I'm getting keywords just like the memory
Memory
podcast.
cues. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all about the recall cues. All right. So Amundsen, one of our two race players, he was on the trip 2 years before, which was the first um, that stayed the winter in that area. And
Hmm.
so the way they did that is you intentionally let your ship get ice locked
Hmm.
so that you can't leave.
Okay.
And he did that. It was a little shady. Like he knew he was doing it on purpose,
I
but he
mean,
kind of
it's not
said
like that's cheating. It's just smart.
well, I don't think he was quite upfront with his crew. It was sort of like,
Oh, about
oh,
provision.
snap, we're getting ice locked.
Because it's a long
Guess we can't
time.
leave now.
I see. Okay. So
Yeah.
like people might not have volunteered for this.
Yeah,
Got
exactly.
it.
And like once you're locked in for the winter, you're there
Right.
until the ice unlocks and lets your ship free.
It's like if you don't have all-wheel drive and it snows and it's okay, you're stuck.
Then you're screwed. That was me
Mhm.
my first 2 years here. I'm like, how do you drive here? I
You
couldn't understand.
you don't.
No, I didn't. I took the bus. I didn't understand being from California, how it all worked.
How you slide through traffic.
I just didn't understand, like, it didn't make any sense to me because my car wasn't like set up and it
Mhm.
just didn't function. I'm like, how do people do this? But now look at me.
Look at you now.
Look at me now.
Jade Dragons in.
Yeah, I got the all-wheel drive and the BlizzX. I
Yeah.
double up on my winter
I do
protection.
that too with the Subaru because I've had just regular tires on the Subaru and went down one of the South Hill hills and literally just kept sliding all the way through and had to like just wave at a car. Sorry. Like, I
Yeah,
don't know what to tell you.
you can't do
I was
anything.
going like 2 miles an hour and I could not stop.
You can't do a thing.
Oh, yeah. I'll share later, but I totally had a trauma experience the other day with seeing a car accident. Random side note.
Oh, that was just a car accident right out here.
Oh, yeah.
And I was meeting with a client right when it happened. We both heard that,
Ooh, I had that happen at
and
my
it was
office once.
crazy.
That
And
crunch is so loud.
yeah, and we're like, should we go help? But then like other people are stopping, and we're like, okay.
Yeah,
But it
no.
was real right here, right outside.
Yeah, no, mine like they didn't close down the road yet. Like I didn't realize how recent it happened. And so
Mm.
there was no emergency vehicles or anything and the left lane was open and a bunch of cars had already gone and then there was a light. So then I was going to go and drive past in the left lane too because everyone else did it and it didn't seem like there was a big deal and legit I'm fairly certain someone had passed away and they had a blanket over them and they were like crying next to them. And I drove past them. I felt super violating and I feel really bad and I'm sorry.
Yeah, I had one where I was the first on the scene. I mean, and I had to be the first one assisting. It was crazy.
Yeah, I
And I
mean,
didn't know what I was doing. I was
a,
a
a
teenager.
fire truck got there like right at the same time, but it was like one of those like, oh, this is like a really big deal, and I just it's awful timing.
Uh,
Yeah,
I've tried to research that accident and see if people lived
I
or
tried to
not.
find it, but I can't find it anywhere.
Yeah, mine was in the
Why?
80s.
That's harder.
It's harder. There was no cell phones. Yeah, so help took a long time to get there. It was like word of mouth, basically. I don't know how that worked.
Probably, and just to link it back in back in those times, getting help when you're stranded in the middle of a ice lock is probably hard to get.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
So let's talk about scurvy for a minute.
Okay.
So scurvy, I
Yeah.
learned more about it than I had ever known. It
Mhm.
just was kind of a pirate movie term.
Yeah, I
You
mean, I
scurvy
just
dog.
assume it's like scurvy. I would imagine a disease of being on like a moist, kind of like your foot rot.
It's so bad. Like
Is
it
that what it
affects
is?
you physically, but it also affects you mentally.
Is it like gangrene for your toes?
It's like you just fall apart, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Scurvy.
real bad.
Real bad.
And the reason it's like a pirate thing,
Hmm.
where I've heard of it a lot, is because when you're out there on the ships, it's hard to get like fresh food.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, yeah, that makes sense. Like
So,
vegetables and
yeah,
bananas, mayhaps.
yes. So people didn't know how to treat it then. And the British, this is again their hoity-toityness, that was their downfall. They refused to do the eating practice of the indigenous people
Which would
or
be what, seafood?
eating well, what Amundsen figured out is if you ate raw seal meat, you didn't have scurvy.
Oh,
And they were like,
interesting.
the British were like, we're only going to eat the food out of our little tins, which is
Tin
all,
food.
it's not fresh. It's,
It's
packaged.
spam.
It's like probably like a spam.
Yeah, if you don't want scurvy, don't
Yeah.
eat too much spam.
So the key is that you need like the fresh foods. And so Amundsen figured this out. He really respected the knowledge of the indigenous people and intentionally studied with them and learned from them and copied their ways,
Hmm.
which was very different in that time to
Hmm.
what like the Western, our roots in the
Right,
West,
right.
like where it was very looked down on
Hmm.
and there was no cultural humility.
Right, right.
It was the opposite of humility. It was
Hmm.
cultural hubris. Cultural
Yes.
hubris. Yes. So they got the scurvy because they're eating out of their tins and it's really bad. But if you eat raw seal meat, you will not get the scurvy.
Hmm.
Now they have vitamins and stuff, so you don't have to worry about it. They didn't have all that back then. All right. So the race is on. So 1901 to 1904, Robert Falcon Scott led his first expedition to the Arctic. He had a specially built ship, the Discovery,
He's
and
one of those two first name, like as a first
Robert
middle.
Falcon Scott.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, what did he go by? Falk?
Yeah, I mean, like
Falky
when your first name and your last name are first names, and your middle name
is,
is cooler, you go with the middle
you
name.
have to be
Hmm.
Falcon. You have
Right.
to.
Call me Falcon.
Yeah, you must. I insist.
Did they actually call him Falcon, or
I don't think so.
we're just leaning into it?
I just feel like that's in there and it
Like
needs to
Mr.
be
Scott.
have a light shined on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they probably called
If
him
I'm
Captain
if
Scott.
that was my middle name, I would hope someone a long time from now would look back and highlight that as the thing to remember. Macy Wildebeest.
Is that your middle name?
No,
Hmm. I have a cool middle name.
mine's Anne.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Middle name.
Celia.
Oh, I remember that now.
It's a character in a Shakespeare play.
Celia with the C. It's
Yes.
also off of Monsters Inc.
Is it?
Celia the girlfriend.
Oh, I remember that. Okay. So he has a special ship, the Discovery, and he got within 410 miles of the South Pole, but they were forced to turn back.
Okay. Why?
It's hairy and wild and woolly.
The
It's
woolly,
just
like woolly wild mammoth?
it's just
Shark?
super rough. It's cold, it's icy, it's unforgiving. You
It,
gotta
and they failed.
you gotta be ready.
They
Like
failed. Did they go into the Bermuda Triangle?
you're not gonna be able to pick some apples on a tree in the orchard.
No.
You gotta plan for
No.
everything.
Yeah.
All right, so they during the National Antarctic Expedition, Scott, Ernest Shackleton, and E.A. Wilton did get within 410 miles, but they were forced to turn back, and they almost died. They're described as being almost unrecognizable, with long beards, hair dirty, swollen lips, and peeled complexions and bloodshot eyes.
Hmm. Ew. Really? Did they have to define like peeled
This
complexions?
is a quote.
Does that mean it's like I'm trying to like is
It means
it
their skin's peeling off.
I know. Is it like from the sun?
I think it's from the cold, and the
Ew.
wind and the
So like
cold.
chapped.
Like extremely chapped, yeah.
Yeah, to be peeling
I
off.
mean, they looked like hell
Hmm.
and they almost died.
Yeah.
So Scott knows he's getting into some hairy shit. All right, then 1907 to 1909, Ernest Shackleton, so one of the people that were in that hairy expedition, went on a second British Antarctic expedition on a ship called the Nimrod,
Mm.
and they came within 97 miles of the South Pole, so getting closer.
Yeah. Who named this ship?
I didn't.
Okay.
I don't care for the name. I think it's a biblical name.
Okay. Yeah, it was like a
I
it's
know
not
it's been
typical.
used insultingly to people, like,
Yeah,
oh, you
that's
Nimrod.
yeah, but now I'm confused about what the word means at all because
But
I doubt they would do that to their own ship name. They could rename them
no,
fierce names or
I
scary
think
names
I
or
think Nimrod wasn't a pejorative, and then it probably just became that in modern time, more modern
do
times
you
than
mind if I
this.
look real
No,
fast?
look it up. Yeah.
Okay.
I actually used to babysit a kid named Nimrod.
Really?
Mhm. And I
I
know his parents didn't do it to be mean, so
I watched a funny interaction. There was a woman whose first name is Gay, Gay, which is a first I've heard that first name before.
yeah.
But a server came up with the check for her at the table
Yeah.
nearby and was like, "Oh, here you go. What was your first name?" And then
Didn't want to be
she,
like, hey,
yeah,
gay.
and then at least they owned it. They were like, "Oh, yeah, I just didn't want to say that out loud and not and have it be wrong." And they were like, "Yeah, I know, I get that." Okay.
Yeah. So I think that it's not originally like a negative thing. I think it's just been turned into that.
And not to say that gay is a negative thing at all. I'm just saying that it was a not a
No, but
typical.
I can see you not wanting to just be like, oh, gay,
Yeah, yeah. Here's
if
your
that's not the name.
right. So it is. You're right. It is a legendary figure in the Bible and other traditions of Mesopotamia, associated with various rulers and warriors in ancient civilizations. A mighty hunter before the
I
Lord.
wonder why people use it as an insult then.
Right. It said, yeah.
Who knows?
Flavius Josephus was described Nimrod as a tyrant. So maybe it started to kind of take change over time.
I mean, I think culture is fickle sometimes.
Yeah, it just says like now it's used someone who's foolish or simple-minded.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
It's an
mis
insult.
it's misused is basically what it yeah, that's what it says is we just do use it wrong. Not we, but collectively it's used wrong.
Maybe because it sounds
Oh, Bugs Bunny
kind
used
of
the
friendly.
word Nimrod, which took a different meaning when it used it after Elmer Fudd's nemesis Bugs Bunny sarcastically referred to him as a
Oh, it's Bugs
Nimrod.
Bunny's fault.
Yeah, that's what it says. It made it stick in North American culture.
Sometimes it just takes a moment like that and everything shifts.
I
So
guess,
Bugs
gosh.
Bunny was definitely an influencer.
Yeah, that's so weird because Elmer Fudd was the hunter, the bald hunter, and couldn't catch him.
Oh yeah.
So that might be the connection with the great hunter. Hmm. Mockingly.
I killed the wabbit, killed the
Love it.
wabbit. Love that one. All right. So Captain Scott's intention, um, was to return to Antarctica, and he got money because, these expeditions are expensive, so you have to like get funded.
Hmm.
So the British government gave him a grant of 20,000 pounds, which was probably a lot back then, probably like 50 billion pounds. And so Scott got people from his original voyage and from Ernest Shackleton's ship, the Nimrod, so that people would have experience. Because it takes a certain type to want to do this.
Hmm.
And so he had a crew that had naval people, scientists, and people that would pay, like just like you and I could be
Hmm.
rich and be like, I just want to go so I can go back and share my story and delight others with my
Right.
tales.
Of almost dying.
Yeah, and it's like,
I'm
wow, everybody's
brave.
enraptured by my tale. Okay, so here we go. Here's the race between Scott and Amundsen. So they both depart for Antarctica on separate expeditions to be the first to reach the South Pole. So Scott and his crew leave,
AKA Falcon,
aka a Falcon, and his crew take flight
so to speak.
on the Terra Nova, that's the name of the ship, on June
Is
15th.
that a band name too? I
Terra
don't know.
Nova? I don't
Yeah,
know.
if not, it should be.
But that means like new land
Mhm.
on June 15th. And Amundsen departs Christiansand on the 9th of August. So it's like almost 2 months later,
Hmm.
and his
Hmm.
ship is the Fram.
Okay.
So Amundsen, very cool guy, had been working on becoming an explorer like most of his life after his doctor career didn't work out because he never wanted to do it really in the first place, and it wasn't really his forte.
Hmm. To please the parents.
Yeah, exactly. But once he got his like inheritance money secured, he was like, I'm out of medical school and
Hmm.
I'm gonna do, my
What
dream.
I please.
Yeah, his dream was to do this stuff. He was fascinated his whole life. And he grew up skiing. He's a Norwegian.
Mhm.
And so he really wanted to, he could see the value of skis as a way to
Mhm.
transport.
Yeah. Well, and I gotta say, like, if there was just a random, like, in Spokane, sign up for this wild expedition. You may make money, and here's cool things about it.
You'll have a tale to
I
tell.
might have signed up. I don't know if it was right this moment.
Yeah, if they're like, we need somebody who's gonna monitor the mental health of the crew when they get the
I mean, I don't know
scurvy.
if I want to do that, but if if they're like, we would like some poor crocheting done while we're all aboard,
Yeah, they may need
sure,
that.
I'll get you some washcloth
A
pronto.
loosely crocheted scarf.
As long as you're not worried about numbers of stitches being correct.
So Amundsen really grew up like looking up to these explorers that like were the first to do this or the first to do that. And so he wanted to be the first to do something.
And that was a big time for that too. Like
Yeah.
well, and a lot of that had, I guess, come to pass. So they had seen it historically happen, and here's a chance.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool to be like,
The
I
first.
discovered this land, even though sometimes
They
they're
do that like
discovering something that people already lived there.
right, like you can name yourself after or like you can have a star named after you for like $1,000 or something. You can't like it's
You
an
you
online thing because
can,
there's like
yeah.
billions of them.
I
So
know. And then we'll go there and they'll be like, what? The star is
yeah,
our sun. It's
you don't
called this.
own a
Yeah, you
star,
don't own
you
this.
peasant. Put your online certificate
The
away.
hubris, the hubris. Okay. So he was like originally going to be the first to get to the North Pole, but while he was on the way, he heard somebody got there first, so he turned his ship around. It's like, well, I'll be the first to go to the South Pole then.
I mean, that's smart.
Yeah, it's good to be able to pivot.
Good use of time, flexibility. Yeah.
So Amundsen's ship reached the Ross Ice Shelf, which is part of Antarctica, on the 14th of January in 1911, and he chose to land at the Bay of Whales. So this was a really good choice because it gave him a 60-mile closer advantage than Scott.
60 miles is a long way.
Yeah, when you chose to land at McMurdo Sound.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So Scott didn't realize that Amundsen was like racing him, and
That sucks. You just not aware.
he learned on the way.
Uh-huh.
So and that really shifted things for him
Mm-hmm.
because it was supposed to be a scientific mission.
Mm-hmm.
He had scientists on board. They were like wanting to do scientific
Right. Like stop and
research,
slow down and look at things
like
and take
gather
their
some
time.
samples,
Mm-hmm.
snap some pictures of some penguins, that kind of stuff.
Right. Right.
But then he realized Amundsen was like on the way to be the first because he got a telegram from his brother saying, "Beg leave to inform you, Fram proceeding Antarctica, Amundsen." That was it.
Mm.
The Fram is Amundsen ship. I love how telegrams are really brief also.
It's some nice shorthand.
I
Why don't we bring
love
it back?
an economy of words.
Right.
I
That's
think it
great.
really helps you be judicious about what you say and think about it instead of
And
just,
it makes somebody have to, like, their brain still gets the same information. It's just
yeah,
less, just
yeah,
less.
it's just less. I mean, you're probably paying per letter, so you have to be frugal
Hmm.
with your wording.
Telegraphy.
I love it. So Amundsen, you know, wasn't interested in this scientific, like collecting rocks or whatever. He wanted just that glory to be able to say, I was the first to reach the South Pole.
Hmm.
So now suddenly it's a race to the South Pole. So Scott's like, F this
Which is
scientific
like
research.
not a good race because you would assume a race would be fair, which means you both start and end at the same place. And this, they both started different places at different times and landed at different places at different
Yeah.
times.
I mean, Amundsen was actually on the way to the North Pole and had to flip a bitch, you know?
Right, but the other person wasn't even aware it was a race. So to me, I'm like, I'd probably take a leisurely stroll, but yeah, I would have liked to have run the whole time if I knew I had to.
Right. But he didn't have to make it a race, Scott, the Brit. He could have just been like, we're going to keep doing our thing. We don't care about being the first. But there was so much pressure at that time, I think, to be the first.
Mm. Well, because they made pressure by saying, okay, speed it up.
So October 15th, 1911,
A
Amundsen
year before the Titanic sank.
sets out to reach the South Pole with 5 men, 4 sledges, and 52 dogs. He traveled to pre-prepared depots and killed dogs for food as they went.
Sad.
17 of the original 52 dogs would make it to the South Pole and 12 made it back. So that was his plan though, because when you're in the middle of nothing, I mean there's nothing out
There's
there.
nothing.
You you gotta have something to
You
eat.
have to do, yeah, I mean, you have to.
And it's kind of,
Cannibalism was frowned
I'm not
upon.
saying like I agree with it or I do it, but
I
just from
mean,
a strategic point of view,
that or eat your people.
you have dogs that, I mean, you basically have food that can walk along with you.
Right,
You don't have to
and
carry
stays
it.
fresh, like it doesn't rot.
Yes, you have a fresh food.
You have a fresh
God,
refrigerator,
it's
a
so messed
walking
up.
refrigerator.
It's so messed
It
up.
is.
But like the part of my brain that just can take the emotions out and just
Yeah, I mean, it
intellectualize
makes
it,
sense.
I'm like, yeah, I guess, yeah, you have
Smart. You just because you could probably feed them scraps of garbage.
exactly. So on the 1st of November, 1911, Scott's main party set out. So they already have these depots set up so that
Mhm.
along the way they're going to have
Supplies.
supplies and a place to stay and all that. So their initial plan with Scott is
Talk.
to use ponies, here's the horses,
Mm.
dogs, and tractors to carry supplies with only using the very final push to the pole using manpower alone.
Hmm.
But this did not work because, as you can imagine, tractors, like really,
Heavy.
really tractors, like
I didn't even know they had tractors back then, honestly.
real tractors with like the big metal track. And like
It was
these are
probably
big
like
things.
tons
They're
heavy.
just like falling through the ice, they're getting stuck. It's just not a good
Was not
plan.
smart.
It just didn't make sense.
Was his ship the Nimrod? No.
Yeah, I think it
Oh,
was.
okay. Just checking.
Just checking.
Just checking on Bugs Bunny's research.
So, man hauling, what is that, you might ask?
Mansplaining, but carrying things.
Yeah, it's exactly that. So,
Mhm.
it's where humans would carry like either like pull or push vehicles and they wouldn't use animals. So it's the opposite really of sled dogs pulling a
Mhm.
sledge.
Okay, okay.
So that was what Scott wanted to do because the whole sled dog thing,
Goes out the window when you eat them.
well, and no, he considered that, that's primitive stuff because that's what the
Mm,
indigenous people did. So they weren't going to do that.
I see.
We have our big metal machines and we will use those.
Raw. Caca.
Yeah, well, that didn't work very well. Um, I mean, it was the man hauling thing was the preferred British technique, and they considered it more noble
Oh, I bet.
than the use of dogs because the dogs is the indigenous people, and like I said, they had the cultural hubris. Okay, I was going to show you a picture. I guess I can't. Never mind. But the outfits too. This is another example of the cultural hubris. So
Hmm.
Amundsen spent a lot of time actually just living with indigenous people, learned how to make igloos,
Hmm.
really learned how they made their clothing. They used like caribou furs and stuff like that. And what was really smart about the styling is that like the back of the jacket went long,
For
so protect you
yeah,
there.
yeah,
But there was also that air layer that would
yeah.
like create that warmth. So Amundsen copied that. He wore the same fur
Mhm.
clothing as the indigenous
Mhm.
people. Guess what Scott wore? Falcon.
A tweed jacket.
Like wool. Like
Like sheep wool.
like yeah,
Which
like
is
wool.
which like yeah, is warm, but it doesn't help from like wind or
Have you ever like fallen in the snow wearing wool?
no.
I mean, it gets wet and
I'm
like
not a
that.
Nimrod.
We apologize to all the people named Nimrod out there.
Correct. I do. I apologize.
Yeah, so you can see that there's this totally different like approach to it.
Mhm.
One's like, I'm gonna, learn from the people that live in these conditions and know what they're doing, versus I'm gonna do things that are the
Far away.
opposite.
Just
Okay.
yeah, not being considerate of the
Yeah, so the outfits didn't work out either. All right, so Scotsmen unloaded and set up camp, and some other crew members set off in February to like check it out the area, and then they saw Amundsen's ship there, and then the next morning they saw Amundsen himself just cruising by on his sled, pulled by dogs, just like I mean, I picture him like just
checking it out.
remember the guy in the COVID that was drinking the cranberry juice on the skateboard and he went totally viral. He's like listening to Stevie Nicks, just
No, but sure.
vibing hard. I just imagine that, like
Okay.
Amundsen just cruising by,
Oh,
like,
I instantly thought of
had a
the Facebook meme of the dude who's like just in like a short pair of boxers on skates skating by and he's like leaning back and he's like skating by. Yeah.
yeah. So I imagine that,
Mm-hmm.
like he's just cruising by, like, what up, my homies there.
You look cold.
Yeah,
Hungry.
exactly.
I got a dinner date though.
So yeah, they saw him. And Scotsmen, they did have some dogs, but they weren't like they had trouble with them. And they're all these horses they brought, these poor ponies, were having a really difficult time uh, on this terrain, as you might imagine.
Slippery little ice skates on your feet.
Yeah, and they had an animal expert with them, and
Hmm.
he even suggested like a different kind of horseshoe,
Hmm.
and Scott didn't listen.
Something with traction. Come on.
So, about horses.
I do.
So they're heavy and they
Yeah,
have low legs.
they are.
So They would like their little legs would, you know,
Mhm.
break through the top layer of the snow.
Mhm.
And
Little feet get stuck.
at one point in the journey, and Scott's journey there, a pony fell, and the dogs jumped at it and tore it apart
Because they were
because they're
starving.
hungry.
It's terrible.
So terrible. Okay, so Lawrence Oates, he's the animal expert
Could
on
you imagine
Scott's
being
crew.
the other ponies watching that happen? Being
Hopefully
like,
they turned them away, didn't make them
do you
watch.
really think they turn the ponies away? They
No,
don't sound considerate at all.
I would have turned like, don't look.
Right, because then you just live the rest of your life, what's left of it, thinking that if I stumble, the wolves will eat
Look
me.
away, look
Ugh,
away.
look away. They could still hear the screams. It's horrible.
It's horrible. So Lawrence Oates is Scott's animal expert that came along, and he hated Scott and thought he was terrible,
Wonder why.
and said he would have quit except he
I
was
mean, he'd
there
be
for the
stranded.
animals.
Oh, I was
Like he really felt like he needed to stick it in with the animal, stick it with it for the animal's sake.
That's a very kind-hearted thing.
It's
Considering.
noble. Good old Oates. Okay. So he'd been on previous expeditions down there, and he knew that if the horses ate the salty sand on the shore, that they would fall down dead.
Hmm.
So he helped keep them away from there, but he also knew that some of the animals were not going to make this journey, and he suggested to Scott that they kill the weaker ones and store the meat for the dogs at depots on the way to the pole. Do you think Scott listened to him?
No.
No, he didn't. He said that would be animal cruelty, even though they're already experiencing cruelty.
Hmm.
Ugh. So in March of 1911, Scott's expedition, they were camped out there still, like where they landed, and they heard loud cracking noises in the middle of the night that woke them up, and they discovered that they were stranded because on an ice floe. So a piece of like the
Okay,
whole
right,
section they
right,
were
right.
camped on broke off and was floating out. And next to them on another ice floe were the ponies.
No. I remember this part. No.
So at that
No.
point, I know
I
it's terrible.
don't want it.
This is why, like,
This is why this made me somehow like think of the trauma I recently experienced because it's also horrible.
it is. This is
Go
real
ahead,
too.
traumatize me again. Go for it.
You don't even need like fiction. Like real nonfiction is scarier than anything.
This is terrible. This is one of the worst things I've ever heard on this
Okay, so
podcast.
picture the ice floe with all the
I
ponies
don't have to. It's
floating
in
there.
there. I already have it.
Um, and then a pod of killer
Yeah, that's
whales
what I remember. Yep.
began circling the ice floe, poking their heads out of the water to see over the flow's edge. Can you imagine that? They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, what's up there?"
I've seen the horrible National Geographic shows where it's just like, and you're like, this is too rated R for me.
So one of the crew members, because they all wrote diaries and journals, that's how we know all of this.
How the only way that they'd ever be remembered.
Yeah, so one of the crew members described in his diary the huge black and yellow heads with sickening pig eyes only a few yards from us at times and always around us and among us the most disconcerting recollections I have of that day. The immense fins were bad enough, but when they started a perpendicular dodge, they were positively beastly. All right, so
Yeah, because I think I remember sharing on the non-recorded podcast about my trauma reoccurring nightmare from childhood about being in a shallow water in a canoe with a bunch of killer whales underneath that knocked me out of the boat. And
it's just like that.
then I stand up and it's like knee-high water, oddly in my
Were they
dream.
sticking their heads up and looking at
Yeah,
you
yeah, and they
with
like
their
and
pig-like
and
eyes?
like and nudging the boat and stuff like trying to figure out what's in it.
Oh boy.
Yep. Thanks.
So Oates, Scott, and some others tried to help, but Scott was worried that his men would die. So he wasn't sure, like, do we help them or not? And soon there was more than a dozen orcas circling. And now the ponies are freaking out and making them panic. And now they're falling into the water in their panic because their little hooves are sliding on the frickin'
They
ice.
don't have their freaking traction shoes.
They don't have, yeah, their clamp-ons or whatever.
I didn't hear anybody worry about what they're eating either, by the
I
way.
know, I know. What are they eating?
Nothing.
So one pony survived.
Out of how many again?
There was a whole bunch. And it was because it somehow fell off and was able to swim to another ice floe that was thicker and
Well, good for it for climbing out. My
yeah,
gosh.
I can't even
How do you
imagine.
climb out with hooves?
That's what I'm thinking. Like
How did that
that
pony
freaking poor pony.
the panic? That would
It
be
was
me.
pure
Remember
panic.
that time when I was in the bowl, the skate bowl,
Yeah, that deep ass skate
and I couldn't
bowl.
get out
No, you couldn't get
with
out.
my hooves?
You were really panicking.
Because I never in my panic thought I could take off my wrist guards that literally were like hooves. So, and I didn't get out on my own. You had to pull me out.
I did. I let you try for yourself for a
I
while.
struggled for a bit.
But it was the point where I could see you were getting tired, and it's like if I didn't help
It
you,
was getting
you
worse.
literally
It was
were
getting
gonna be
worse.
stuck in there.
I remember that because I was just like my fatigue and I had no muscle strength anymore.
To
And
be fair, that is the deepest skate bowl I've ever seen in my
it was
life.
so steep and I had no
It's
momentum
steep
anymore
and
because I
deep,
was
yeah.
just at the bottom standing there.
It's ridiculous.
Anyways, some ponies need help.
Yes. So, one got away. The rest were killed by one of the crew
That was
members.
the Ida pony of them all. All the other ponies knew that pony would make it, but none of
Yeah.
them would.
He killed the horses out of mercy, so the
Mm.
orcas at least wouldn't eat them alive
I
with a
mean,
pickaxe. Do you imagine how bloody and horrible and awful this scene was?
well, I
Horses
mean, and him
screaming.
getting so close, wouldn't he be scared of falling in?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like decisions were made
I feel like there's flaws in
rapidly.
the story. I feel like they tried to make it sound like something positive out of a terrible situation. Maybe that didn't even happen.
I mean, all we have is the journals to go on.
Right,
So create your
exactly.
own narrative.
Right. I mean, because if you go back, you can't go back and say you have ponies that you don't have. So you have the horrible story, and then you say, I did what I could.
Do what I could.
Did
I
you? Did you
pickaxed
really?
them.
You didn't stay scared over there?
Oh my goodness. So they're animal experts, as I said. Oates already thinks Scott is completely ignorant.
Yeah.
And he said, I dislike Scott intensely and would chuck the whole thing if it were not that we are a British expedition. So he's putting his duty to the
Country.
cause. Yeah. Okay. So where are we now? December 15th, 1911. At 3 p.m., Amundsen becomes the first person to reach the South Pole. He won.
Wow.
Who did you think was going to win?
Well, I mean, and so Amundsen is, sorry,
The
not
Norwegian.
Scott, the Norwegian. I mean, I would have assumed him just based on like him having the actual know-how, but it sounds like Scott Falcon thought he would win just because he had the manpower.
Yes, I think Falcon thought he was going to win.
Because he had the 60-mile advantage too at the start.
It was originally just him heading down there.
Hmm.
Amundsen did the U-turn.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, I can imagine he was probably super annoyed.
Probably, right. I get that.
There's Amundsen in his fur coat and pants, cruising by with his sled dogs.
Right.
Okay, so they got there first. They raised the flag of Norway. He had five in his crew, and they hung out for a couple days. They're having fun. They left behind messages and spare equipment for Scott's party.
Nice.
They actually didn't think they were going to be first. They thought they were going to be second, but they got there and like, oh, we're actually first. Weird.
Hmm.
And so, they figured Scott was probably right behind him. And they got back to base camp January 26th. It took them 99 days to get to the South Pole, and it was
Yeah.
more than 1,600 miles they traveled over. So that was December 15th. More than a month later, January 18th,
A
1912,
long time later.
Scott achieved his dream. and reached
Ish.
the South Pole-ish. Yeah, he wasn't first. Can you imagine after all that struggle you go and you see the freaking Norwegian flag?
I mean, I've been in some tournaments. It's a bitter taste.
Yes. So Scott wrote in his journal, the pole. He put pole all in caps. Yes, but under very different circumstances from those expected. We have had a horrible day.
Mm-mm.
Add to our disappointment a headwind, 4 to 5, with a temperature minus 22 degrees, and companions laboring on with cold feet and hands. Great God, this is an awful place, and terrible enough for us to have labored to it without the reward of priority. He noted that the return
Wow.
back to camp was sure to be dreadfully long and monotonous,
Right, because now there is no mission anymore. You're just going back defeated.
and the monotony, I mean, the landscape's pretty much
The
probably
same. It's
the
like when
same.
you drive,
The
like
last 2 hours from Tri-Cities to here.
correct. I was gonna say going that direction, but yeah, it's the same view for two
Yeah, the
hours.
last 2 hours is awful.
hmm You can't be tired at all, or you will fall asleep.
So Scott noted that one of his peeps in his crew, Edgar Evans, fell down on February 4th and became, quote, dull and incapable, unquote.
Dying? Question mark.
So dull, I think, means like you don't have like mental capacities, and then incapable, I'm thinking like not able to be physically.
Like walk and stuff? Like dying? Question mark.
Um, he died 2 weeks later.
Okay.
So like dying.
Okay,
Yeah,
like
like
dying. He
dying.
was like
Yeah, he
dying.
was like
He was
dying.
like dying. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He died very, very similar to dying.
I just assumed.
Pre-dying, we can probably call it.
He pre-death.
Yeah, pre-dying.
He pre-death all over the place.
Yeah, so
Okay.
he
How come I just guessed that off what you tell me and he wouldn't assume something terrible's happening?
I mean, did I say that Scott was an asshole? Because
I mean, you only said the name of his ship.
he's noted as being kind of a dick. Okay.
I mean, yeah.
So poor Edgar Evans fell down again 2 weeks later and then
Wait.
died.
Yeah, okay.
So the four
Okay, so they're just
survivors,
saying they're just noting the times he fell down. Like he fell down another
they,
time and didn't get back up
so
again.
back in the day, people journaled like everything.
Right. So
You
he
just
fell
noted
down.
things. He fell down, yes,
He fell
and
down
died.
and died.
It was probably
A
like
murder.
Edgar's fell
He was
down.
probably murdered.
Edgar fell down and did not
That's
get up.
that's what I would describe if I was a murderer and that was my journal. Edgar fell down twice. Second time he didn't get back up.
Did not get back up. Poor Edgar.
First time he was like dying. Second time he dead.
Oh my God. So now there's four left.
How that happens. Numbers go down when they die.
Four little monkeys jumping on the bed.
One fell off and bumped his head.
So these four that are left, they have terrible frostbite. They are malnourished. Um, and there's constant blizzards, a
Do you know who's
temperature.
not malnourished during this? The
Yeah,
killer whales.
the killer whales. They got some pony snacks.
They were excited. The fiendish eyes, that's definitely because they'd never had pony before.
Like,
Yeah, it's like the first time my cat discovered what bacon was.
those poor ponies. God damn it. All right, so it's 40 degrees below zero. Snow just completely making it impossible for them to even see.
Mhm.
Um, so they don't, you know, I mean, it just sounds
That
awful.
that alone makes me cry. Like I've driven where like the fog is so thick or the snow and that it's just you're just hoping you don't die. You don't know
Yeah.
what from, but something probably.
No, I've been driving in many of those too.
I drove once through it with a haboob, where it's a big dust storm. Those are
Oh yeah,
scary,
yeah.
really scary.
So Oates, our animal expert who wanted to quit but was in it for the cause
Should
and
have
the
quit because
animals,
the cost was not worth it.
he in particular was really suffering at this point.
Hmm.
He had an old war wound
Mm.
that made it really difficult now. It's acting up, sometimes, especially in cold, these things act up. His feet were quote unquote probably gangrene.
Like probably dead,
Pre-dead.
pre-dead feet.
Yeah, I mean, walking, I mean, that sounds so painful.
Yeah, I mean, at all
I
in
mean,
that
I've
cold.
had like a little thing between my big toe and the toe next to it that was rubbed raw from a flip-flop incident.
Oh yeah, no, I've had flip-flop, just like
And
some
I
sand
was really like, I cannot go on. So I
drag
kind of
me back or put me to sea.
like probably great gangrene. Yeah.
Probably dead.
So Oates asked the other three to go on without him. Oh,
Because his poor feet.
he just couldn't do it
Foot probably
anymore.
hurt.
And his war wound.
Oh, did he probably die?
Uh, but the other three refused. They're like, no, we're not going to just leave you here. So the four of them ended up huddled up in a tent during a blizzard. So that it was just too much for them to travel for a couple days, March 16th or 17th. Things were so bad that, back then journals were so meticulous. You said your date, even the time sometimes, the location.
Mhm.
It was very much like this is the
Right. Well, and
record.
at that point, they're all considering they could die for some reason.
So at this point, Scott's journal no longer recorded dates, so that's a bad sign.
So yeah, I mean, he's not capable of writing.
Or it's just given up. I mean, it's probably a
Mhm.
combination of physical and
Right.
mental
Right.
breakdown. So around March 16th or 17th, they were basically out of food and
Mhm.
supplies. And Oates, poor Oates, I feel bad for this one because he seemed to have some values that I align with.
Yeah.
He said, quote, I am just going outside and maybe some time.
Hmm.
And those were his last 10 words, Oates. So the others knew he was going to sacrifice himself to increase their odds of returning safely because he wouldn't slow him down. There would be less food to have to share. They tried to talk him out of it, but apparently he didn't even bother to put his boots on before he walked
That's,
out into the
and you just
storm.
reminded me that I think I related this last time with your other podcast where the coats were still inside the lighthouse, the mystery, like missing
Yeah,
one.
you don't.
Like you don't go out there unprepared unless you know what you're doing is to
Yes.
give up your life in those
Yeah,
conditions.
yeah. Yep. So Scott wrote, it was the act of a brave man and an English gentleman.
Here, here.
So really, they're trying to be stoic and retain dignity on this grueling return back to the ship. So there's three left now. They went another 20 miles, and all three died
Wow.
just 11 miles from where the next food and fuel depot
Oh,
could have saved them.
wow.
So Scott wrote his final diary entry, knew they were gonna die, which
Hmm.
is really sad. So he wrote, had we lived, I should have had a tale to tell of the hardihood, endurance, and courage of my companions, which would have stirred the heart of every Englishman. These rough notes and our dead bodies must tell the tale. We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weaker, of course, and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more. For God's sake, look after our people. No. So even though he was kind of a dick and his cultural hubris um, caused some of this, I feel sorry for him too.
Are you sure he didn't push out the other guy either? Because like he
It's only journal.
stopped writing.
We
Maybe because he couldn't anymore. And that would, you're right, it would increase the odds for everybody else. And he was already not feeling well and couldn't keep up if they left him.
I don't know. I
I
mean,
mean,
they
not.
know this because they did send out a
I'm just
search party after the winter ended and they
right.
found their bodies in their journals. So it's
Right.
all based on their journals.
Right, which he has to try to look good in all of this still because of his cultural hubris. So I don't know, I just have a hard time trusting anything he says,
Yeah.
honestly.
They left their bodies there and buried them there, but they
Because
took
it's
their journals.
mhm.
Oates was never found.
See, something's wrong about that because if he was, I don't follow this.
What are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking if
Cannibalism?
then I think the hawk killed him, first of all, because
The Falcon? Excuse
yeah,
me.
sorry, Falcon killed him because he stopped writing in his journal. Like you said, they were like everyone else wrote until they died. Why didn't he write till he died? There was a few days where he didn't write, and then all of a sudden he's written about us doing this.
Maybe his journal wasn't found. Maybe they didn't take it because it said, "Hey,
Maybe
I
his
think they're
journal
trying to
wasn't
kill me."
maybe his journal wasn't found because it was discarded of because everyone else's was there. Why wouldn't they take his journal, especially if they're trying counting him as a hero for volunteering his life?
These are very good points.
I would keep that journal to give to his family if I had any bit of care in my soul. But if I let ponies die to killer whales and I'm willing to try to make it sound good by axing them in the head, that's my level, that's my line. I'm just going to say he's a liar and call it good. I'm okay with that as a person.
Well,
I
that's
think
the
he
race
killed
to
Oates.
Antarctica.
I think he killed Oates
Poor Oates.
because they hated each other. That was known in
That
Oates.
was known.
That was
Yes.
known that they hated each other, and yet Oates's journal's gone, and he gets kicked out of the group.
Yeah. Whoever writes the history makes the history.
Your pets are gone. We don't need you no more. That's like, what else was he there for? Oh, you crochet washcloths? It's cold. We don't wash anymore. Get out. The end.
I feel more complete that
I
I
do
was
too.
able to repeat this and actually record
No,
this.
I liked it.
I felt sad for 4 months.
I have a layer of because I think the first time with this one too, like with the names and stuff, there's a level of processing that you're trying to keep up with it. But now,
Yeah.
like I was able to hear more of the story part,
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of
and now I
names
know
and
what
ship
really
names
happened.
and
A lot happened.
there's a lot of
A lot
that.
of
A lot
murder.
happened. And that's a true story and it's freaking
Yeah.
crazy.
I mean, if we're just going off story here, then I mean, he very it's a murder story.
There's definitely some shady shit going on.
There's murder afoot.
Murder afoot.
Um,
Pre-dying,
Oates's feet, to
off,
be
actual
specific.
dying.
Pre-death. A lot of
Okay.
pre-deaths happened in this story.
Well,
Until next
until
time.
next time.
Well, we've had the burn your journal episode, but that like is like exactly opposite of this.
Keep the journal.
Yeah, I mean, freeze your journal. Yeah, maybe this goes back to the very beginning where I talked about like keeping records in cold, safe places. So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
still write your journal, just store it in a place that nobody else has access to until you pre-die
Yeah.
and then ultimately die.
And ultimately
So until next time, write your journal and put it in your freezer.
put it in your freezer. Okay. I mean, I really what popped into my head, but is not what I really want to say. It just sounds cool, is don't pickaxe the ponies. But
Mhm.
that's not really what I want to say. But don't pickaxe the ponies, I think sounds good because
I
there's
mean,
a
it
lot of
sounds
pleas in
good.
it.
Don't pickaxe the ponies. I mean, but then they end up dying by killer
Right,
whale.
right, right.
But I think that happened anyways because I don't see these people who are so scared of these killer whales going willingly to the side of the ice because the ponies are on a different
Oh,
sheet of ice
yeah, what
too,
is
by
it
the way.
leaning over the
I know,
ice
like everything
with their
about this sounds
pickaxe?
dangerous. Like, and they're on a different sheet of ice anyway. So the ponies are trying to they fall off and they're like,
In the water and then
I mean, aren't the killer
panicking.
whales already in the water?
Yeah, over a dozen at one point.
Right. So aren't they already
Yeah,
biting and
would you
eating
reach
at
your
them?
arm over and pickaxe a pony
Yeah, and
with an
and and
orca right
and
there?
and almost getting knocked in by the pony. Like there's so many risky
It's
things
so
about that. It's
suspicious.
so suspect. I don't believe
Okay,
it.
well, don't say you're okay. Until next time, don't say you're pickaxing the ponies
If you're
when
not
it's
picking,
clearly a lie.
yeah. So until next time, stop lying to us.
Stop lying.
We just want the truth.
I do. Bye.
Bye.